Back in the day, Amanda and I used to take long-ass road trips whenever we could string a few days off. We both lived out east, Delaware, and any excuse to get the hell out of town was a good one. We'd plan our routes around restaurants that we'd seen on TV or weird Airbnbs in the middle of nowhere. Long weekends, holiday breaks, and the occasional mental health Monday that we'd call in sick for. We made it a habit to drive hundreds of miles with no real goal except fun and escape. We were in our mid-20s. Hangovers were brutal but recoverable. Every trip ended up with greasy food, sore backs, and stories that we'd never tell our mothers. Amanda liked to drive. She said it helped her feel in control. I didn't mind. I liked being the co-pilot, scrolling through playlists, reading old printed out directions from MapQuest, or watching the little TomTom GPS freak out when we took another wrong turn. Later, we upgraded to smartphones, which made travel a lot smoother at first. What used to be us just sticking to the big highways and familiar exits turned into a game. Who could find the fastest shortcut, the weirdest detour, the most backwoods route that shaved off 20 minutes? We'd zoom in on the map, pick some obscure little offshoot that looped around a mountain or snaked through farmland and give it a go. Usually, we'd end up on a gravel road surrounded by cornfields or pass through towns with one gas station and no stoplights. Sometimes it was a bust and we'd backtrack half an hour. Other times it was magic, like when we found that speakeasy in Kentucky just by chasing a shortcut off I-64. We always felt like we were onto something, like real explorers. But that one trip through West Virginia, that one changed the game. That was the one that soured us on the shortcuts. I can still remember Amanda tapping on the screen and saying, "This'll save us at least 90 minutes. Look." County Road 217 cuts right through the hills and drops us off into Charleston from the north. And I said, yeah, sure, why not? Let's roll. And God, do I wish I would have said no. The road narrowed fast. We were only 10 or 15 minutes into the shortcut and already the shoulder had disappeared. The paint on the asphalt was mostly gone now, and we hadn't seen another vehicle since we turned off the highway. I held the phone in my lap, tapping to zoom in on the blue line that we were following. Amanda had both hands on the wheel, sunglasses sliding down her nose as she squinted into the sun. "You sure this is right?" she asked me. "Yeah," I said. "Cuts 90 minutes, comes out just west of Charleston. We skipped 3 mountain curves and a whole mess of Sunday traffic." Amanda made a face. "It just looks empty." "It's fine," I said, even though I was starting to feel a twitch in my gut. The map showed a bunch of little townships along this stretch, like stepping stones through the hills. Burnwood, Cardham, Ebb Hollow. But so far, nothing. No towns, no houses, no signs of life, just endless turns through dry pines and crests over that gave way more to the same. The road dropped into a valley and kicked up a cloud of dust as we passed a rotting billboard for Guthrie's world-famous smoked meats. The thing was bullet-pocketed and hanging on by a single corner. Amanda didn't say anything, but I could tell she was just as put off as I was. We passed a cluster of old trailers that looked long abandoned, a busted-out sedan half swallowed up by the weeds, a barn with its roof peeled off like a sardine can. I felt my stomach knot tighter. "I think these towns are dead," I said, and Amanda glanced over at me. "Huh?" "Boom towns, maybe, mining or rail. They're still on the map, but they haven't been towns in decades now." I could see her chew that over, then she shook her head. "You want to turn around?" We were 25 minutes in by then, and I stared at the screen. The shortcut was almost halfway done. "Nah," I muttered. "Let's just keep going. We might as well finish it now." Amanda nodded, but she didn't smile again after that. The road narrowed again and curved through this shallow ravine. On either side, there were husks of buildings, clapboard houses gutted by fires, a post office with ivy growing through its windows, a school bus with no wheels, and a family of crows nesting on the roof. We passed this old wooden sign that said Burnwood Pop 214. Then below that, spray painted in red, "Not anymore." I think that should have been the moment that I said screw it and called it, but I still didn't do it. I told Amanda that we were probably close to the other side, maybe another 10 miles, maybe 15. That wasn't a lie, I just didn't want to admit that I'd made a bad call. A few miles later, just when the gas light blinked on and Amanda let out this sharp shit, we saw it. Hadley Springs. A crooked white sign marked the entrance, swaying on rusted chains. The town itself was better preserved than the others. Buildings with full roofs, intact windows, and a main drag that ran straight through. No trash, no graffiti, and cars parked along the curbs like residents had just stepped inside for lunch. But there was nobody outside. We rolled past this small diner with an open sign, unlit, a barber shop, an insurance office, a church with no name. Not one single person, no movement, no sound, just the soft roll of our tires and Amanda whispering, "This is weird." "Yeah, I know," I responded. "Just keep driving." We were maybe halfway through the town when the engine made that low burble sound that it does before it runs completely dry. "We're not gonna make it," Amanda said, panic creeping up into her voice. And then, as if on cue, a gas station appeared on the corner. Small, squat, old school. Just two pumps and a little shack of a building beside them. There was a man out front. He looked to be in his early 30s, thin as a wire, wearing a sweat-darkened flannel and faded jeans. His hair was long and yellow-white, tied back into this greasy ponytail. He was sweeping something off the concrete. As we pulled in, he leaned the broom up against the wall and turned towards us with a grin. Amanda eased her window down. "Y'all just passing through?" he asked. His voice was thick with that mountain drawl, every word dragging. Yeah," Amanda said. "We're headed west. Took a shortcut." He laughed. "A lot of folks do that. GPS will send you to all kinds of ways out here. Usually come in thinking there's more to see. Usually the same thing, too." "What's that?" I asked him. He shrugged. "That the place don't look right." Amanda handed him a 20. "We just need enough to make it to Charleston." He nodded and started pumping gas. We watched him through the side mirror. I didn't want to look around, but I did, and what I saw chilled me more than anything yet. Behind the diner window, two faces staring out. Not blinking, not moving, just watching. Across the street, in a curtained upstairs window, a silhouette. Broad shoulders, head tilted like it was trying to listen. Then the other window, and another. All of them still, and all of them focused directly on us. They didn't look off enough to scream like horror movie style. They weren't mutants or monsters, they were just off. Like they'd been raised up in a place where both daylight and manners weren't commonplace. When the man finished, he capped the tank and came back around, handing Amanda her receipt with a look that I won't forget. "You girls are lucky," he said. Amanda blinked. "What?" "Coming through during sunup," he said. "Most folks come after dark, and when they do, they don't get to leave." He let that sentence hang there like a noose. Then he smiled and tapped the roof of the car. "Y'all drive safe now." "What do you mean by that?" The guy just winked. "Best get going," is all he said. "Unless you want to stay and feel some southern hospitality." The guy then licked his chapped lips. We didn't wait. Amanda peeled out of there like she was chasing God himself. The road out of Hadley Springs curved hard to the left, then pitched upward through this series of hills that seemed to go on forever and ever. We didn't talk. Amanda's knuckles were white bone on the steering wheel, and I kept looking behind us through the side mirror, convinced that we'd see something or someone following. But the town stayed behind us, tucked into a valley like an infected wound. "Don't say anything," Amanda finally muttered, eyes locked on the road. "Just don't." And I didn't. Not until we hit the main highway again, 30 miles later, and civilization came rushing back in a form of roadside motels, Waffle Houses, and blinking lights of Sheetz gas stations. Amanda pulled in and parked, and we sat in silence for a moment, letting the AC hum between us. Then she said, "What the hell was that?" I shook my head. "I don't know. I kept thinking they were going to come out and try something or stop us." She looked over. "That guy at the gas station, what do you think he meant by that, about people staying?" "I don't know," I said again. "Maybe it was nothing, maybe it was just some kind of joke." Didn't sound like a joke to me. And I didn't respond to her. We went inside, bought some water and some chips, and the cashier didn't even look up. Amanda leaned against the counter while I paid and said, "You ever been so scared that you felt it in your teeth?" I nodded back at her. That night we got a cheap room, double beds, and a TV bolted to the dresser. We didn't go out for drinks like we planned to either. We didn't order food. We just sat in those same clothes that we wore all day, watching reruns and half listening for engine noises outside. Eventually, Amanda passed out. I didn't though. Not until the sky went from black to blue and I knew the worst part of the night was over. I kept thinking about the creeps watching us from the windows. We took the long route home, highway all the way. No more back roads, no more shortcuts, and every time Amanda brought up a new trip, a new detour that she read about online, I shut it down before she could even finish. That was 5 years ago. We don't travel together anymore. Nothing bad happened between us, no falling out or anything. It just got real after that one. I never go through West Virginia without a full tank of gas anymore either. I used to hike alone all the time, through creeks, up mountains, across long stretches of forgotten forest trails. Didn't matter. If I had a pack, a few granola bars, and a decent forecast, I was out the door. There was nothing like being off-grid, far from people, where your thoughts could stretch their legs a little. I used to brag about the number of solo trips that I'd done. My friends thought I was nuts. They'd hit the gym or go drink downtown, and I'd be halfway up some canyon in silence, watching the shadows shift across the stone. Then I made the wrong turn. It happened 3 years ago, and it changed everything. I still hike, yeah, but only with groups now. Crowded trailheads, well-labeled loops, paper maps in the pack, and fully charged GPS clipped to the strap. I stick to the popular stuff, where you're guaranteed to pass a dozen dogs and soccer moms before noon. If it's not paved or packed with REI dads, I don't want it. All because of that one day, that one fucking shortcut. I was hiking Welsher Wash, a long winding creek that cuts through a mix of rec areas and wilderness. Families hung out by the parking lot, splash in the shadows, but the deeper you go down, the fewer signs there are. Less noise, less people, and that's what I wanted. Quiet. I pushed upstream for a few hours, deeper than I'd ever gone before, until it was just water, trees, and the breeze through the canyon walls. It was beautiful. And then I got smart, or at least I thought I did. I told myself I could cut time on the way back, save my legs a few miles, and that shortcut nearly got me killed. Welsher Wash has always been my favorite. Secluded, winding, clear enough to drink straight from. Families usually hung out near the trailhead, barbecuing or letting kids splash around in the wide pools. But I wasn't there for that. I wanted distance, solitude. The further up the wash I went, the quieter it got. Hours passed, and the trail thinned into deer tracks. No signage, no people, just water, rock, cottonwoods, and time. That day, I pushed harder than usual, deeper than I'd ever gone before. I didn't really have a goal in mind, I just wanted quiet. I passed 2 dry forks and an old beaver dam, even this old elk skull caught in a tangle of willows. Eventually, I found a hidden waterfall spilling off into a sunlit pool, deep and green. No footprints, no wrappers or graffiti, so I took off my boots, let my feet soak, and cracked open a tin of sardines that I packed with some trail mix and dried mangoes. For a long time, I just sat there listening to the water. Everything else felt distant. Work, bills, texts. This is what I came out here for. But as the light shifted and the shade began to stretch, I realized just how far out I'd gone. I figured I had to be at least 5 or 6 miles out, maybe more. And this wasn't flat, easy terrain either. It would be a very long hike back. That's when the shortcut idea started to crawl up in my brain. I noticed earlier how the creek twisted and curled around big hills and those rock bluffs. If I just cut across 1 or 2 of those big loops, I could shave off a mile, maybe 2. It made perfect sense. The creek always led back to the lot. It wasn't like I could get lost if I kept tracking toward water. So I did. At the first bend, the creek wrapped wide around a red dirt hill. I climbed up straight, loose rocks and high desert brush, topped out sweating and picked up my way down the backside. Sure enough, there was water, snaking through cottonwoods at the bottom. That saved me 20 minutes easy. I felt super smart and capable. I tried it again. The second shortcut was trickier. The climb was longer, steeper, and choked up with deadfall. My thighs burned halfway up, but I could already see where the creek had curled back on itself, so I pushed hard, scraping through the sage and cactus. And that's when I saw a fence. Chain link about 6 feet tall, bent and bowing but still upright, running straight across the ridgeline and into the trees on the other side. No signs, no barbed wire, just a rusting wall between me and what I figured was the shortest path home. I followed it maybe 40 yards until I found a spot where the bottom was peeled up. Not much, maybe a foot of space, but enough for somebody desperate or dumb enough to squeeze through. I didn't think twice. I dropped to my belly and wormed through it. My backpack scraped, but I made it. The terrain beyond was different, flatter, shadier, trees set further apart. Everything was overgrown but somehow looked clearer, like it had been maintained long ago and then left to rot. There were crushed beer cans in the dirt, a rusted axe head, and the roots of a juniper. Something about the air felt off, though. I kept moving. The shortcut had to pay off soon, right? 10 minutes in, I stepped out of the trees and saw it. A house. One story and grayed out. Plywood nailed over some windows, but not all. A rusted propane tank slouched beside it, with the water silo half swallowed up by weeds. There was a dirt road winding from the opposite side, one that I hadn't seen on any of my maps. I stopped walking. It looked old but not abandoned. Not ancient ruin, not collapsed shack, just paused. Like somebody stepped away for a season and then just let it all fall into disrepair. That's what I told myself, at least anyway. Then this sharp crack split the air. Something struck the dirt a few feet to my right. Another blast hit the dead log just behind me. The sound echoed, loud, close, and unmistakable. A rifle. Then came a voice barking from the house. "You lost, boy?" I froze, heart pounding. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. The third shot hit the tree behind me so close bark exploded off into my hair. And that's when I finally ran. I turned and sprinted, crashing through the brush like a spooked animal. The hill that I just climbed up felt twice as steep on the way down. My boots skidded on the loose rock and sand. Another shot cracked out behind me. This one sounded a lot closer. I didn't look back, just dropped low, arms pumping, adrenaline burning hot in my throat. The slope blurred past in streaks of color, red dirt, torn limbs, flashes of sky. I slipped once and caught myself on this scrub oak. Tore skin clean off my palm, but I kept going. I hit the fence at full speed and dropped to the ground, shoving my pack through first. My shirt snagged on the mesh, but I didn't care. I wormed under the whole belly first, hard hammering, lungs heaving like I just ran a marathon. Behind me, another shot rang out. I heard it slice through something. It wasn't bark this time either. It sounded like metal, maybe the silo, maybe the fence. Once I was clear, I just kept moving. Down the hill, sliding sideways through gravel and pine needles, I found the creek again. Jumped straight in, boots and all, splashing down like it would save me. I didn't stop to catch my breath, I just kept moving until the trees closed in again, and the terrain started to look like Welser Wash again. Somewhere behind me, the man was still yelling. Something about property rights, something about hikers think they own the world. Then I didn't hear anything, just the water and the wind and my gasping breaths. I followed the creek, pushing as fast as my legs would go, every noise in the brush setting off alarms in my brain. A snapping twig, a bird taking off, even the sound of my own pack shifting felt too loud. I kept imagining him showing up on the trail in front of me, waiting, with that rifle. But he didn't, and I didn't see him again. It took me nearly 2 hours to get back to the main trail. My socks were soaked, one knee bloodied from a fall that I barely even remember. I passed 2 kids in flip-flops carrying pool needles, and I nearly burst into tears. Their mom looked at me funny, like she could tell that something had gone wrong, but nobody said anything. At the trailhead, I climbed back into my car, locked the doors, and sat there shaking for 15 minutes straight. I didn't even take off my boots, I just sat with my hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead while my brain tried to put the pieces in some kind of order. Eventually, I drove off. I didn't report it, didn't tell the rangers, didn't file a complaint or call the police. And I know how that sounds, but you have to understand, this wasn't some idiot taking pot shots from a distance. This guy meant it. He wanted to scare me, maybe even worse. And I knew deep down in my gut that if I went back with somebody in uniform, it would turn into something crazy. Besides, it was really on me. I made that call to go off trail. I saw the fence and went under it. He wasn't really wrong about that part. Still, I think about it constantly. I think about how close I was to stepping up to that house. About what if I knocked on the door? What if I hadn't noticed the first shot in time? I hear that crack sometimes when I close my eyes, feel the sting of the bark still hitting my face, smell the metal of the fence when I hit the dirt to crawl under it. That day ruined solo hiking for me. I don't care how many apps or GPS trackers I have now, how prepared I think I really am. I'm not going out alone. Not where there's nobody to hear you scream. Not where a wrong turn drops you into somebody's crosshairs. I still hike to this day, but only with others, only where there's cell service. I study maps, I look for trip reports, and I don't just wing it anymore, no matter how scenic the route might actually be. And I never, ever take shortcuts. I was 16 when my mom took me on that trip. It was supposed to fix things between us. She worked nights and I skipped school. We barely talked unless somebody was yelling. It wasn't like we hated each other. We were just two people living in the same house, orbiting each other and pretending that it didn't hurt. I think she thought I was gay. I thought she was checked out, just making shit up about each other. She rented a car and planned 5 days through the Midwest, said we'd see the ocean, eat everywhere worth eating, talk if we wanted to, or just listen to music if we didn't. I remember standing in the driveway, watching her pack snacks and a cooler full of gas station drinks like we were going to summer camp. She looked hopeful. I didn't have the heart to be a dick about it either. Truth is, it was a good trip, great even. We drove through Kansas and Oklahoma, laughed at dumb billboards, crushed barbecue in Houston. She played her old playlist, Fleetwood Mac, Duran Duran, and I played some of mine. There were hours where we just vibed, no tension, no weird pauses, just a mom and her kid in a rented SUV heading toward the saltwater. I didn't think anything would ever feel that normal again. But there was one part of the trip that I still can't talk about without getting those pins and needles feeling inside my hands. It wasn't supernatural or anything, we just stumbled into a part of the map that nobody was supposed to see. We were already feeling good by the time that we hit the coast, like maybe this whole thing had worked. Then we made a wrong turn trying to cut across Texas and everything flipped. We were in Texas when it happened, middle of nowhere, somewhere between Corpus Christi and God knows what. After we hit the ocean and taken our selfies, Mom decided that we saved time on the way back by skirting the loop. "It'll be faster this way," she said, squinting at the GPS, waving off my half-hearted objections. I couldn't really argue. I wasn't old enough to drive, didn't understand maps, and wasn't really paying that much attention anyway. I just wanted to get back to the hotel and pass out with the AC blasting. The road we turned onto wasn't even paved the whole way. Big cracks, long patches of gravel, brushed so close that it scraped the side mirrors. But it was quiet. After about 20 minutes, I realized we hadn't passed a single car, not one. Just dried up fields, barbed wire fences, and the occasional buzzard circling overhead. Mom kept her cool for a while, then she turned the music down. Then she cleared her throat a lot. She turned the music off completely. "We're fine," she said, gripping the wheel a little tighter. "We're still heading north." I checked my phone. No bars, of course. Just that little red X that meant that we were off grid. "No service," I said. "Yeah," she muttered. "No kidding." We passed a cattle gate with a rusted sign that had no words, just a symbol that looked like a warning. Then came the buildings, 7 or 8 of them, dumped in the middle of nowhere, like somebody gave up on a project halfway through. Concrete blocks with doors that didn't lock, a steel warehouse with a faded biohazard sign. One of the buildings had a tarp blowing on the roof and a giant red stencil that said, "Test area, no entry." Mom slowed the car. "The hell is this place?" I didn't answer her. I was too busy looking at the yellow radiation stickers peeling off one side of the sheds. "I don't like this," she said. She put the car in reverse, but her hands were shaking. "We shouldn't be here. This is some kind of military testing or something." "Just go," I said. "Please." She whipped the wheel around and floored it. Gravel spit up behind us. We didn't say a word for the next 7 miles. When she finally slowed down, she said, "We must have missed a turn." I leaned over the center console, peering through the windshield, trying to see anything familiar. That's when we passed that same cattle gate, the same rusted sign, the same buildings. "No," Mom whispered. "We didn't." "We're back," I responded. "We just went in a full circle." We both looked at each other and then at the road in front of us. She didn't stop the car this time. She just turned left instead of right, kept her foot on the gas. I kept checking my phone like an idiot, praying for a bar, but still nothing. 15 minutes later, a new sign appeared, metal, sun-faded, and covered in stickers and bullet holes. It said, Mexico, 18 miles. Mom then hit the brakes so hard that our seatbelts locked up. Mexico, she said. Okay, this can't be right. But it was. There was nothing else around. No houses, no businesses, just endless flat desert and that sign. The GPS was now frozen. The phone was dead. We were cooked in the middle of Texas and now somehow looking at the Mexican border, almost like it was the last option. Mom pulled over now. We were both breathing heavy. She dug around the glove box for the charging cable and plugged her phone in. We just need like 5 seconds of signal, that's all. The phone powered up and we watched the bars. The charging cord was a 10-foot supercharger for emergencies. Now we could try to send texts over without it burning up the battery. But nothing. I got up and held it in the air, turned slowly in the circle thinking it would help, but still nothing. Just hot air, distant thunder, and a sky that was starting to dim around the edges. I think maybe we should call 911, I said. My mom shook her head. And tell him what? That we got lost and saw a building? I guess she was right, even if I hated it. So we sat there drinking the last of the water, splitting a bag of trail mix while the heat started to bleed out of the day. The wind picked up. Somewhere in the distance, something metallic clanged like a gate slamming shut. Then my mom stood up. Dust, she said, pointing. There's a car coming. Sure enough, a cloud of dust was rising in the distance, a big one. We both got up and started waving, and when that didn't feel like enough, I leaned over and started honking the horn in bursts. The headlights flashed back. The SUV, black, fast, and spotless, peeled off the road and came straight at us, eating up the ground like it had a purpose. By the time it skidded to a stop, we were standing in front of our rental, hands in the air. The doors opened and 5 men stepped out. They were all dressed sharply, pressed shirts, dark jeans, heavy boots, gold chains, sunglasses, even though the sun was mostly gone now. One had a cigarette burning between his fingers. All of them had rifles, and not one of them was smiling. They said nothing, just fanned out in front of us, and then one motioned to the car. My mom looked and whispered, "Don't move." But it didn't matter. Another man waved us off, quick and urgently. We stepped aside, and as soon as we did, 2 of them started yanking open our doors, going through the vehicle like they owned it themselves. I started to say something, anything, and one of them hit me. Just one time, metal against the side of my head and lights out. I came to on my knees in the dirt, ears ringing, head pounding. My mom was crying softly next to me, hands still up. The men were laughing now, chattering in Spanish, but we didn't understand. Tossing our snacks into the dirt, pulling wires from the dashboard. One of them held up my backpack and shook it out like it might be hiding something valuable. When nothing came out but a crushed protein bar in my hoodie, he threw it on the ground and spit on it. The one who hit me just stood nearby watching, no expression. I don't even think I saw him blink. None of them asked any questions, none of them said what they wanted. They never pointed the guns away either, so every second felt like it might be our last. And then just like that, they stopped. One of them whistled, a sharp casual note like somebody calling a dog. The rest turned and headed back to the SUV. They piled in fast, revved the engine, and spun off in the direction they'd come from, kicking up the same trail of dust that they'd arrived with. My mom helped me to my feet. My head throbbed, and I could already feel the bruise blooming up against my cheekbone. I asked her what they took, and she said, "Nothing, they just looked." We got back in the car and just sat there for a moment, doors locked, engine off. The silence afterward felt alien. I watched the sun finish dipping behind the horizon and waited for tears to come, but they didn't. I was too stunned for that now. "I'm driving," Mom said finally, and I didn't argue with her. We turned the car around, rolled slowly in the opposite direction, and this time it only took about an hour and 45 minutes to see lights, a town, real pavement, cell signal. She sped into the first gas station we found, parked half on the curb, and ran inside. I stayed in the car, blinking at the overhead fluorescence while people walked in and out with bags of chips and coffee. A few minutes later, she came back with a clerk and said the police were on their way. An officer showed up in less than 10 minutes. He looked more bored than he did concerned, asked where it happened, asked if we had any names, plates, or any idea which direction they'd gone. My mom explained to him that we'd been lost, and we thought that we were near the border, that we'd run into, she hesitated, some men with guns. He didn't write much down, he just nodded a lot, told us we're lucky, then added that we shouldn't be driving around that area without a reason. He didn't say it like a warning, he said it like a judgment. They called in an EMT who checked my head, cleaned the cut, then asked if I wanted to go to the hospital. I said no, I want a shower, a bed, and I wanted to never ever think about any of this again. We got a hotel a block from the police station. Basic room, 2 full beds, nothing fancy. Neither of us spoke for a very long time. I showered, sat on the edge of the bed in a towel, and watched my mom scroll through her phone with a blank look on her face. At some point, she put it down and looked at me. "Are you okay?" I nodded. Then she said, "You saved us, you know. Waving them down like that, getting their attention." I shook my head. "No, I didn't. I got us into it. If I hadn't honked..." She cut me off. "We were already in it. You did what you thought would help us." That was the closest thing we ever got to talking about it. After that, we mostly just let it fade. Told the story once to my aunt, but left out all the stuff that would make people uncomfortable. Made it sound almost like an accident, like a moment that passed as quickly as it came. But it didn't pass. It stuck with me, still does. I think about those buildings sometimes, about what kind of place has nuclear signs with no fence, no guards, and no name. I think about how we loop back without realizing, like the desert didn't want us to leave. I think about those men in the SUV, how calm they were, how organized, how we were nothing to them, just 2 Americans who took the wrong road. That trip ended up fixing a lot between us, believe it or not. Not the ocean, not the playlists, not the barbecue, just surviving. A couple of summers ago, I was having some serious car problems. At the time, I was going through all kinds of other crap. My boyfriend and I had just broken up. My savings were depleted. I was caught up in some drama at the place that I was working. In the middle of all this hectic time, my car starts acting funny, shaking whenever it started, blowing clouds out of the exhaust, the dashboard throwing codes and check engine lights. Pretty much everything that could go wrong seemed to be happening to my car all at once. Here's the deal. I know absolutely nothing about cars. And you can say it's because I'm a girl, but even if I were a guy, I still probably wouldn't know anything. I don't really care about cars. I don't care about understanding them. I'm more than happy to pay someone to do all that work. Back then though, especially being newly on my own, I had very little in the way of disposable income. So when the car started chugging and rattling, it had me sweating right away. If it was anything major, I would be out of a car because there's no way I could afford it. One of my friends made a suggestion to me, and that was to find a local mechanic online to just run simple diagnostics, locate the problem, and maybe work out a more feasible solution, depending on what it would cost me. My friend had just recently needed to get some work done, went through a guy advertising on Facebook, and not only did he fix everything wrong with her car, but he was totally transparent about the cost. The guy had since booked up and wouldn't be able to help me out for at least 3 weeks or maybe even more. My car was getting worse and worse every time I started it. I got to work finding someone else online, and I started with Craigslist, but quickly found out I didn't like how just anonymous it was. I threw up a post and got dozens of responses within a day, but none of them had anything to do with fixing my car. It mostly was just a lot of unsolicited pictures and offers for dates and other kind of weird stuff. I scrapped that post within 24 hours, and from there, ventured out into the world of Facebook Marketplace. This seemed to be way safer off of the jump. People could see my post, see what I was looking for, and the people that responded also had a name and a face. Half the people that I commented on I recognized from somewhere around town. They said they'd keep an eye out for an affordable mechanic for me. By that Friday, I got a message from a guy named Simon, and this guy seemed pretty legit. His profile was a few years old. wasn't covered in over-sexually posts or political propaganda. He seemed normal, and his account had a long history of doing mechanic work. Lots of photos of him working on cars in garages, wearing jumpsuits in the shop, that kind of thing. Simon seemed legit from top to bottom, and with the situation that I was in, it was all I was really looking for. Through DMs, I learned that Simon was branching out into his own self-employment and was doing all his own work. He had worked for a major dealership in town and then worked for a couple of shops after that, was fully insured and certified. This was music to my ears, all the exact stuff that I wanted to hear. Simon said he had one job where he was finishing up and that I would be next in line. We exchanged phone numbers and I started saving all the cash that I could. I was anxious, but things were finally looking up. I didn't really know what to expect cost-wise though, but I knew this was the best option and the one that I could most likely afford. I let my worry take the back seat and then tried to focus on things that I actually had control over, like my mood and how I performed at work. I scraped together a little extra cash, had a couple of good nights out, and just relaxed. Things were good, and if I let them, maybe they'd become great. Sure enough, I get a call a full day earlier than I was expecting. Simon was ready for me. He'd finish up with his last customer. The fix was easier than he first diagnosed, and the car was back on the road. Again, more music to my ears. I was starting to write all my problems off at this point, like a true sucker, until you get something in writing, or even better, and see the work with your own eyes. Never take anyone at their own word. That's how all of these marketplace websites work, and it makes for a very deep headache. We exchanged information, and I gave him every little detail that I could about my car. The normal stuff, like the year, the make, the model, and symptoms of the issues that I was having, that kind of thing. He gave me the address to his garage and the time that I should arrived. Everything felt professional for a guy that I just found online, so I was even more enthralled with getting it all done and finally over with. I told Simon thank you so much for your time and that I would see him tomorrow. The address that he gave me was about a half hour away, on the side of town that I wasn't super familiar with. He told me to be there by 10 a.m., and I didn't want to be late, so I planned on leaving at 9. That never happened though. I woke to my phone buzzing around 5 in the morning. It was Simon. He said that his day had been thrown off schedule because he had an appointment later on in that day that he forgot about. He didn't want to leave me hanging. He asked if there would be any way possible that I could bring the car to him now, so he could at least take a look. I didn't work today, was already awake, and plus I just needed this to happen already. I told him I would be there as soon as possible. He sounded super excited, said goodbye, and I started getting ready. I blasted through a shower, pulled some clothes on, and scarfed down this microwavable breakfast. And then I hit the road. I don't even think the sun was up yet. I coasted along until I didn't know the roads anymore, and it wasn't until I went past that last stoplight that I realized I wasn't even in a neighborhood anymore. There were still houses out here, but there were big empty lots, full of grass between them. Still, even with the dwindling civilization around me, I didn't think twice about it. At some point, I reached over to grab my phone, check my messages, and change the song playing throughout my speakers. The second that I picked it up though, I get this incoming call from Simon, so I answered it right away. I put the phone to my ear as I prepared to say hello. I could hear Simon talking to someone else though. He sounded weird. It was his voice, but he was talking in a totally different manner. Not professional, or street if anything, if you get what I mean. Nah, she'll be here soon, he explained to someone, who sounded just as weird. Shh, I'm calling her. Then they both got quiet. Hello? I said into the phone. Jody? Simon asked, back to normal voice. Yeah, is everything okay? I asked. Yeah, I was just making sure you weren't having any trouble finding a place. I know it's kind of out there, he said. No worries, I'm on my way. I think I'm 15 minutes out, I said. Do you have another mechanic with you today? I asked. He kind of stammered a bit and said, No, why? Oh, I thought I heard you talking to someone when I first picked up, I explained. Must have been the radio or something, he said. Just checking to make sure you weren't lost. How far out is it? I asked. The map said it's not too far off the main road. You'll see, the address that I gave you is just for the driveway. You'll have to drive about a half mile to get back into the shop, he explained. I was starting to get a little nervous now. He didn't mention that it was in the middle of nowhere, or that I would have to drive off-road. My car was already having problems. Bouncing around the country road sounded like the best way to make those problems worse. Still, I'd come this far. I still had hope that Simon was going to be my guy to get me through this and get it fixed. He could hear the apprehension in my voice and went right to saying all the stuff that I wanted to hear. How we check the engine, make sure everything's flushed, and it perked me right up and got me on my way. I said bye and hung up the phone. I'd caught him lying though, a skill that I picked up during my breakup earlier that summer. He walked right into it, and I couldn't tell why. Who'd he have with him that he didn't want me to know about? The road came up and I turned into what was a big dusty turnout along the road. From there, it was a little single rut dirt road that snaked off into the forest. My gut sank almost immediately. This was clearly not a road that led to a residence or business of any kind. There might be campsites back there, at the very most, and if not, piles of highway trash and shooting targets. I rolled my car through the lot and then onto that dirt road and bumped along for maybe 5 minutes, then brought my car to a stop. Even with the rising sunlight, there was nothing out here. No light in the distance, no big warehouse, no shop doors, nothing. I grabbed my phone and called Simon. "Hello?" he said. "Hey, I don't see anything out here, like at all. How far did you say it was?" I asked, knowing he had already said it a half a mile off the main road. "Oh, about a half a mile. Well, I've already gone that far. I've been driving for a few minutes now," I interrupted him. "Oh, well, you're almost here then. I don't log distance well. It might be further than a half mile, 2 miles maybe, but it has to be 2 miles at the most," he explained. My gut kept twisting into a knot. Things were starting to not add up, and I was feeling a fool for being out in the woods at 5 in the morning. Unbelievably, I kept pressing on, tapping my gas pedal and daring my car to break down at any damn moment. I go just a little bit further when my phone lights up. It's Simon calling again. I answer and bring my car to a slow roll. "Hey, I can see your headlights," he exclaims. I feel a bit of confidence for just a split second, but then I remember the string of buzzwords that he used to get me out here. I'm realizing this guy has to be a bullshitter, and a supremely good one at that. Anytime I expressed any kind of doubt, he started saying all the positive stuff that I needed to hear, and I just take him at his word from there. "Yeah, just keep going, just back through this tree line and you're here." "Why is your shop out here, Simon?" I just asked him point blank. "Oh, you know, he started. "There is no shop, is there?" I asked in a measured tone. I was just gauging his reaction at this point to see how much of what he was saying was a lie. Then he did something unexpected. He hung up on me. I looked down in disbelief, scoffed, then froze. Shadows flickered up ahead, just beyond my headlights. I slowly looked up, and to my horror, 2, maybe 3 people were skulking through the tall grass, coming right at me. I screamed and hit the lock button, which was a relief, but I really needed to actually leave. I was panicking and wasting time. I grabbed my shift knob and slid it into reverse. Nothing happened. I could actually feel that nothing happened within transmission, or anywhere for that matter. When I hit the gas, the car still went forward. Not good. I shifted into reverse and it set, and then I shifted back into reverse. Nothing still. I shifted back into drive. Still nothing. My eyes slowly split wide open as I realized I was stuck in neutral. The car problems I was having were about to get me murdered. I continued playing with the stick, played with the pedal, but nothing was working. The engine revved, but one of the gauges just spun circles. Everything else was totally still. Everything but those phantoms beyond the windshield. There were definitely 3 of them, and they fanned out and closed in at a sickening pace. I could feel bile steaming up my throat from my anxiety, from my desperation that led me out there, and tears began blurring my vision, but I knew the car was my only hope. I kept playing with the stick until it clicked. The car dumped into reverse and suddenly I was rolling backwards, the way I came. That dirt road was bumpy and uneven, but for the most part, it was a straight shot. I didn't even bother to use a mirror at first, just started jetting backwards as quickly as the car would take me. I could feel myself hitting the bumper here and there, but that was a small price to pay in the face of whatever these dudes had planned for me. "Hey, get back here. We're gonna get you fixed up." I heard someone yell over my engine. "Come on, you were so close," another voice hollered. And then, nothing. I bucked back out onto the main road. I shifted into drive and blasted towards town. Thankfully, the car was operating better than it ever had. Like that off-road session had corrected some of its own issues. Whatever the case, I was thanking God that I didn't get caught up in whatever the hell was going on back in those woods. It didn't even occur to me until I got back into town that I should probably call the police. I looked back into my messages and of course, Simon had blocked me. I figured he did the same with the phone, which was probably just some kind of burner. Thankfully, I got back home without any incident. I wanted to just go back to bed and sleep it all away, but I was so riled up from that experience. I ended up calling the police and they took a full report. I didn't do any kind of follow-up or anything, but in my gut, I have a feeling that they found him. I keep an eye on the public bookings, people they pick up for various crimes, and I saw Simon amongst the names one week. Only time I ever saw it. The last names didn't match what he had before, but the whole Facebook account was just a lure, or so I believe, to get girls like me to go out into the woods. And the scariest part of it all is the guy almost got me. A few years ago, my husband and I turned onto the minimalist lifestyle. That is, if you don't know, retain a base minimum of belongings and don't over-encumber yourself or your home with excessive amounts of stuff. We were knick-knack types, collectors of whatever we thought was cool or even unique. Each windowsill in our house had different charms or minerals on display. No surface went undecorated the entire time that we were together, up until the introduction of this whole minimalism idea. Once we learned about it, we started selling all kinds of stuff. Facebook Marketplace became a passive form of income for us, but we still weren't fully satisfied. After the first year, all the knickknacks and small collections were gone, but we still felt like our house had way too much stuff. I sold a bunch of my crafts gear that I wasn't using anymore. My husband sold off tools and outdoor gear that he never used. We started to plan out what we were going to do with all the money that we saved as well. It was only like $500, but at the rate we were going, it would turn into a nice little chunk of change, more than enough to take some kind of nice vacation. We wanted to empty out even more of our belongings, to see if we can get the money pile up to $1,000. I was starting to sell some of my collector items, like antique chinaware, paintings, and things I largely considered just extra. My husband was on a mission to move his big 11-piece Pearl drum kit. He played a bit in college. It was just one jam band that maybe had a half a dozen shows throughout his life. But for some reason, he always held on to that drum set. In the back of his mind, he always wanted to come back to it. But now, 10 years had gone by, and he hadn't so much as even picked up a stick during that whole hiatus. He realized that the drum kit was really just a dream, and was something that needed to go. We came up with a fair price and added it to our ever-evolving Facebook Marketplace offering. It was the highest mark item at the time, and was going to make more than double the amount of savings that we accumulated. We started to get some bites, but they were mostly just offers that my husband wasn't interested in entertaining. People wanted to make trades or payments, or just make lowball offers in general. My husband wasn't having it, stuck firm on the price. He knew what that kit was worth, and he'd already moved the price down significantly. The price was right. Now we just needed to wait for the right buyer. A week or so later, I was home alone. I had the day off. I was going through my normal morning routines when I saw that I had a notification. Someone had commented on the post about the drum set. He said it looked great, it had an amazing price, and would love to come take a look at it. He ended his comment by asking if he could send us a DM, to which I replied yes. I finished up what I was doing, the laundry or the dishes, something like that, then called my husband Mitchell. "Hey, someone commented on your drum set," I said. "Does he seem serious?" he asked. "I can't tell yet, he just commented on it. But he's the most serious person so far. He wants to come take a look at it. What time are you going to be home?" I don't know," Mitchell stammered through the phone. He was a site manager, and they were putting up a new building. His hours during this project could vary. "I'm not really sure. So if he's wanting to see it this morning or even afternoon, and you feel comfortable, go ahead and let him come by and take a look at it. The price is firm though. This is just purely a quality check of the instrument," he explained very clearly. "Sure, sounds good.
Anything special I should mention? That it's been collecting dust for 10 years and may as well be brand new. I gotta go though. I love you. I love you too, I said, and then hung up. That was pretty much all I wanted to know. Make sure he was okay with the guy coming to look at it while he wasn't here, and if there was anything special that I should say. Other than that, we lived close to our neighbors, and I knew them pretty well. Also, had a decent amount of security within the house, a camera, a gun, that kind of thing. Robbery would be risky for anyone coming into our house, or at least, so I thought. I hit the guy back on the post and told him that we were good to go, to which he followed up with a DM. He said his name was Ryan and that he was very excited about finding such a killer deal. I gave him a little background info on the drum set, and that I would be home all day if he wanted to swing by and take a look at it. Ryan said he had some other things going on, but could stop by around 1 p.m. That was just a few hours off and it suited me perfectly. I gave him our address. I told him to hit me back on Messenger if anything changes, or if he had any trouble finding the house. With that, he signed off, and I resumed whatever I was doing. I actually looked up a YouTube video and decided that I was going to clean the drum set, and I wanted to know the best and safest way to do so. It really had collected a healthy layer of dust. I wanted it looking good for whenever this guy came around. If Mitchell came home and I had the thing sold, boy, he'd be happy. After I got it dusted and shined up, I went and took a shower. I still had plenty of time before Ryan was supposed to show up, so I figured I'd get some more of my own chores done before I did the showing. I hopped out and started drying off, and then I just got this weird feeling. I couldn't place it at first, but it was like there was something that I didn't recognize beyond the bathroom window. We had one of those weird fog glass windows, so you could just see blurs and colors, no real definition through the glass. But there was something bright red in our driveway. At first, I thought it was maybe a neighbor or a delivery driver. I snuck into the bedroom and got dressed, as I quietly listened for anything weird. Footsteps around the side of the house, or maybe somebody already inside. I really didn't know what to expect, so I kept my phone handy just in case. I snuck out to the kitchen and looked out the window. There was a red hatchback parked in the driveway right behind my car. Okay, not the weirdest thing, but definitely unusual. Just as I'm getting ready to put on my sandals and ask the neighbors if they know anything, I see something. There's a man outside the living room window, essentially standing in the front yard, nowhere near his car. I keep an eye on him, and I don't really panic at first because he looks like, I'm not sure, maybe he's confused, lost? He looked like a little kid. It's really hard to describe. Definitely a full-grown man skulking around my property though, but the look in his eyes was that of a child. It's weird. Still, I pulled up my phone and had my husband's number ready to dial. This guy was picking around our garden, mostly the herb patch where we grew a bunch of stuff in little squares near the front of the house. He touched just about everything and started helping himself to links of rosemary and thyme, handfuls of basil leaves, mint, even oregano. When he had this nice little stash, he took it back to his car and tucked it inside the console. I figured he was going to hop in the car and leave, but to my surprise, he went back to the area near the window and started fiddling with the hose. He got it unwrapped from the holder and turned the knob and then started watering the herb garden. He gave it a few spurts, then put the nozzle in his mouth and started drinking from it. He did this for like 10 minutes, no joke. After he was satisfied, he made sure the hose was untangled, then started walking over to his car. I kid you not, this man washed his entire hatchback in my driveway with that hose, with my own water. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, but I was so perplexed with what I was watching, I didn't even bother to stop him. This guy was clearly crazy, or maybe he thought he was at a different house, but either way, it was my entertainment for that afternoon. When he was done rinsing his car and having a sip, he walked the hose back over and wrapped it up on the holder, then killed the water just as he found it. Okay, some semblance of normalcy, I guess. I'll never forget watching him pull his phone out and then putz around the front yard, Facebooking or whatever the hell he was doing, like he was just at his own house. Now, I really thought this was a case of mistaken address. He must be from out of town. Thought he was at his sister's house or something. Maybe he knocked while I was in the shower and I didn't answer. Now he was just waiting around. But then it happened. He put the phone to his ear. Then my phone started vibrating. I was receiving a Facebook message call from Ryan, the guy who was supposed to come over in an hour or two. He was the weirdo, looting my garden and helping himself to my hose. I shook my head and answered. "Hello?" I said. "Hello," he said. Super weird start. "Is everything good? We still on for later?" I asked, staring right at the back of the guy's head. Yeah, I was actually gonna ask, could we move up our meeting? A bunch of stuff came up later and it'd be easier for me to come take a look rather than later." "Sure. How about noon?" I asked, checking the clock. That was in 20 minutes. "Perfect," he said, throwing his hands in the air. "I'll be there in a bit. Thank you so much." And then we both hung up. It was the weirdest thing watching this guy lie, then react to his own lies. I was really put off by the whole thing and called my husband right away. I was not very pleased when he didn't answer the first, second, or third time that I tried to call his phone. They were in the middle of putting up these massive steel warehouse buildings, and the phone service was really bad beneath all that metal paneling. Whatever the case, I don't like how everything was progressing. I'm looking down at my phone, deciding what to do, if I should call the police, when I hear him knock. I look up and there he is, peeking through the glass by the door. He gives me this creepy little wave. This was the exact kind of nightmare that I envisioned, with my husband not being home. I stood there like a deer in headlights while Ryan continued knocking on the door. To my horror, he turned the knob and just pushed it open. Mitchell hadn't locked it behind him when he left this morning for work. I couldn't believe what I just let happen, and that I failed to make any kind of call to the outside for help. "Hi," he said in a slow, creepy voice. "Are you Erica?" "Yes," I said, trying not to sound shaky or scared. "Are you Ryan?" "Yeah, sorry, I've been knocking for a little while. Didn't mean to freak you out or anything," he explained. "Yeah, it's just that we agreed to meet later at like 2 p.m. I wasn't expecting you this early, or to be poking around my garden," I said. A slow smile split across his face. "Oh, yeah, you saw that? Guess I couldn't help myself," was all he said. That was it. No other explanation about showing up early or lurking around my property. I was becoming sick at this point. "So, can I see that drum set? I have cash." That brought me back to the moment. I said, "Okay, it's right back here. Maybe this all is just a fluke. This guy is excited to get the kit for such a steal." I led him inside the rec room, and the guy started going off about how pristine it was. Loved the vintage look. Loved how preserved it was. All that good stuff. This guy was on his hands and knees inspecting every little hinge on the frame. Then he starts telling me about the old band that he used to play in, how they went by the wayside after the frontman and songwriter got locked up for selling drugs. He was just a fill-in guy for a while, taking gigs as a sub for other bands on tour, or local acts around town who just needed him for one night. Got to learn a lot about genres and what he liked to play during those years. And suddenly, I realized this guy had been talking to me for like 40 minutes, going on and on and on about his whole life story. He hadn't so much as turned an eye on the drums since he started talking, and now it was just all about him. I was getting that weird vibe again. I didn't know what to do. Ryan was making himself at home, walking from room to room, giving himself his own little tour, and complimenting everything that he found. I couldn't tell if this guy was just high or crazy. Either way, he would continuously kept giving me these creepy little glances over his shoulder. "Look, I have a lot to do," I finally said. "Do you want to buy the drum set? That's what you're here for, right?" Yes, he said. "The drum set. It's perfect. I want it." He pulled a bunch of money out of his pockets, disorganized bills, crumbled and stuffed at random. He counted out the amount that he needed and kept asking me over and over and over again what the amount was. It was a nice round number. I really couldn't figure out why he needed me to repeat it so many times. He gave me the money and then started breaking the kit down and then schlucking it out to his car. He talked the entire time, like he never took a breath, continually talking about what he was going to do with his drums and the plans for his weekend. It was like this guy thought he knew me or something. After he got the drums loaded up, he actually tried to come back in our house, and thank God my husband got home around this time. Ryan's entire demeanor changed the second Mitchell's truck rolled into the driveway, like he'd been caught out or something. He went from looking like a curious kid to menacing and troubled. He didn't speak to my husband at all, just simply said thanks, climbed into his car, and left. I never heard from Ryan again, and thankfully haven't seen him either. The whole scenario was probably nothing, but I can't shake the feeling that I dodged something scary that afternoon. In hindsight, it just seemed like he was probing, seeing how far he could take the situation before I would start to react. I misjudged everything from start to finish and felt like a dummy for putting myself in danger. I guess if you're going to make online sales, that's just the name of the game.
I was taking a road trip with my good friend Carter to visit some other friends from college. The drive was pretty far, about 15 hours, but we thought with the both of us, we should be able to do it in one long go. I started driving first, then about 4 hours in, Carter took over. The plan was for me to sleep while he drove, but I genuinely couldn't. I don't know what it was, but I was never able to get comfortable. So by the time it was my turn to drive again, I was pretty tired, maybe even more so than I was before he took over. I was still able to keep my eyes open and pay attention to the road, but somehow I never noticed the gas tank getting really low. We were driving Carter's old Chevy, which didn't have the fancy tech to alert you when your tank is low. There was just a gas gauge that I never even looked at. Wasn't until the car started sputtering that I quickly realized we had nothing in the tank. Carter quickly woke up and started searching on his phone for the nearest gas station. But not even 30 seconds later, I had to pull off the highway because the car wouldn't accelerate anymore. I felt so stupid. Even worse, Carter said the closest gas station was 4 miles up the road. We were kind of in the middle of nowhere. It was just plains all around us, and there were no other cars on the road. We talked over our other options for a few minutes, but ultimately Carter decided he'd walk to the nearest gas station and bring back a canister, while I stayed and just watched the car. Maybe not the best plan, but it felt like a waste to call for help and have to pay $200 just for some gas, when the station was still within a walkable distance. Although it was 1 a.m. and dark outside, Carter didn't seem bothered as he left the car and started heading down the road. Within a minute, he was out of sight. I sat back and basically just thought about how stupid I was for getting us in this situation. But just a couple minutes later, I saw headlights coming down the road from up ahead. They came down and passed by, but they were going much slower than they should have been. I think the speed limit was 55 or 60, and they passed by going maybe 15 or 20. I watched in the side mirror, and they didn't speed up after passing. They slowed down even more, eventually stopping and doing a 3-point turn to come back around. Honestly, I didn't want to admit I was out of gas, or needed help or anything. And I didn't have to. They came back down the road and passed by, even slower this time, like maybe 5 miles per hour, probably staring through the windows at me, before picking up speed and heading back the way they initially came from. What was that about? I kept my eyes glued to the road for the next few minutes, waiting to see if they came back around or not. I had a pretty bad feeling about it. Maybe it was just my gut, but I started to think something could go pretty wrong soon. I got my phone out and called Carter. I just wanted to let him know, and maybe to hurry up if possible. But the phone rang all the way through. He didn't pick up. That definitely made me worried, but maybe he just had his phone on silent, or lost service along the road. I waited a minute, then called again. Still nothing. At this point, I definitely wasn't being rational, but I made the decision to ditch the car and try to catch up with Carter. I think it'd only been 10 or 15 minutes since he'd walked away, so if he was still walking, surely I could jog and catch up in just a few minutes. I got out and made sure to lock the car, then started jogging down the side of the road. It was real quiet out there. So quiet that every time I took a break from running, I'd notice the ringing in my ears, only because there was not even the slightest sound to drown it out. I jogged for 15 minutes. I thought I would have caught up to Carter by then, unless something made him start jogging or running for some reason. I decided to pull out my phone and call him once more, and it was just then that I heard the sound of it ringing. It was very faint, in the distance, somewhere off the side of the road. I looked out at the nothingness past the shoulder of the road, and just barely, I could see a light glowing in the grass. My body tensed. "Carter?" He didn't respond. I couldn't see anything at all, aside from the dim phone screen glowing. I took a few steps off the road and into the grass, calling out again. Finally, I got a response. I could faintly hear Carter's voice coming from somewhere near where the phone was, but I couldn't tell what he was saying. I hurried closer, and Carter yelled again, and this time I could hear he was telling me to get down. I still couldn't even see him yet, but I did what he said, ducking in the grass. And that's when I looked back and saw a car coming down the road. I immediately knew it was the same one I'd seen, moving slowly, just like before. They were looking for us, or Carter, I guess. They made 3 or 4 turnarounds, slowly passing the area and very obviously searching for us. Once it seemed like they finally left, we got up and booked it to the gas station. Carter explained that the guy initially pulled over and tried to get him to get in his car. He said he was extremely creepy and really didn't hide the fact that he had bad intentions. After Carter refused, the man stepped out of his car, and Carter instantly took off running. I guess the guy thought he'd just continue running down the road, so he got back in his car to chase him, but Carter ran off the road, jumped in the grass, and just hid. At some point, his phone flew out of his pockets, and he was too scared to get up and reveal himself, so he just stayed hidden. Anyway, we got to the gas station and were able to get help. We also told the police about the guy, describing his car and everything, but they never found him. It was very much a horrifying close encounter, and I feel really bad even still for being the reason we were put in that situation. One thing's for sure though, I'll never forget to fill up the gas tank ever again. This was back in 2014. I almost never went on road trips back then, because I rarely had time to take multiple days off just to drive, plus the additional time to actually enjoy the vacation. However, I was in between jobs when my family was planning a surprise birthday for my dad turning 50. Back then, gas was way cheaper than it is now, and flying was a lot more expensive in comparison to the gas prices. So both to save money and because I didn't have a job at the moment, I decided to make the drive. To be safe, I made it a 3-day road trip. So after the first full day of driving, I pulled into the nearest motel and booked myself for the night. It wasn't the nicest place, but I didn't mind. I slept in until 11, then packed up and opened the door to head out, only to be startled by a man standing right in the doorway. "Excuse me." I tried to get past him, but he didn't really move, so it was a bit awkward. The man looked mid-40s and had heavy bags under his eyes. Just overall, not the kindest face. As I moved the rest of the stuff into my car, he remained creepily standing outside the motel room, watching me. Good thing I wasn't staying there any longer. I checked out of the motel and headed back onto the road. This was my longest day of driving. I planned to get at least 10 hours in. The first while went pretty good, I'd say. A lot of it was through towns and cities, and it wasn't until 5 to 6 hours in that they faded out, and it became more rural, long stretches of road. Once I realized towns were getting few and far between, I stopped at the next gas station to fill up. I paid and started the pump, then headed inside to get a coffee for the road. When I was heading back to my car though, I saw someone pull their car up really close to mine. Like from the front, it looked like their bumper was touching the back of my car. It was a deep red, old Corolla. Nobody was outside of it putting gas in, and the windshield was tinted. I couldn't see anything at all through it. But knowing someone was in there, I couldn't shake the sense that they were watching me. I took the pump out and got back in, leaving the gas station. Almost immediately after, that car left too, again never having put gas in or anything, and pulled up behind me to merge onto the highway. I was hoping this was all just a coincidence and just continued with my drive. I noticed them behind me for a while, maybe 5 or 6 cars back. But as the sun set, I couldn't really tell what cars were what. I could only see a cluster of headlights behind me. As it got later, fewer and fewer cars were out, and I went about 4 more hours without seeing that car again. I'd almost entirely forgotten about it, figuring it was never anything to begin with. I was more concerned with trying to keep myself awake now that I'd finished my coffee. The nearest main city was still 2 hours away, and I really wanted to make it there and get a nicer hotel, maybe even check out the city in the morning. But that was only if my eyes would stay open long enough. I thought maybe if I stopped to get another coffee, not even for the caffeine, but just for the distraction of constantly sipping on it, maybe it'd be enough for me to power through the next 2 hours. At the next gas station, I merged off the highway. Right away, I could see it was closed, the convenience store section. I was pretty disappointed, but I did need to top off my gas anyway, so I pulled through and started filling it up. Almost right away, I saw a single pair of headlights pull off of the empty highway and begin down the exit ramp toward the gas station. This place was already creepy as is, just a standalone, dark gas station with nothing around it. Couldn't even see past the outdoor lights. So when I recognized the car coming down as the deep red Corolla from the other gas station, my heart rate instantly picked up. I couldn't stop myself from the eerie thought of if I was being followed. I hurried to unplug the nozzle and put it back, but the car pulled in extremely fast, not even going up to the pump, but pulling right up to the side of my car by the driver door. I was just able to get in before the passenger door of their car opened. A man got out, not even hesitating to run up to my door and try to open it. It took only a split second of looking at him to recognize the guy as the same man from the motel. Those unnerving eyes sent chills through me. I turned my car on, and when he realized he couldn't open the door, he stopped trying. I shot a glance at him as I pulled away, expecting to see anger or frustration, but what I saw was even more disturbing. He was grinning from ear to ear, like this was funny. Complete psychopath. I floored it back to the highway and didn't stop until I reached the city. Thankfully, I'm almost 100% sure I wasn't followed that time. What really scares me is that the man got out from the passenger seat of the car, so someone else was driving him and was in on whatever sick idea that guy had in mind. They followed me for over 10 hours from the motel, and even worse, they could have been following the day before without me ever knowing. I still find it hard to forget that road trip, even a decade later. A few years ago, when I was in college, I was heading home to meet up with my family over winter break. The drive was nearly across the entire country, so multiple long days in a row of non-stop roads. I was a broke college student though, so I wasn't booking any hotels or even motels. I packed some blankets in the back seats and figured I'd sleep wherever I could, whenever I got tired. Around 1 a.m. and after 11 hours straight of driving, I finally called it quits for the night. I was starting to get dangerously tired, so I found the next rest stop I could sleep at and pulled over. It was one of those small pull-offs right on the side of the highway, meant for just a few cars or trucks. It had a little building with what looked like a washroom and a couple vending machines. There was only one other car there, parked in the spot farthest back. so I parked in the opposite spot to give us both some privacy. Then I got up to stretch my legs and use the restroom real quick. It definitely wasn't clean in there, which was kinda gross, but I did my business, then left to go back to my car. When I did, there was a man standing right outside my window. He was looking in at what I had in there. Can I help you?" My voice visibly startled him. He nervously took a few steps back and chuckled, saying he was trying to see if I was in there to ask if I had some cash for the vending machine. My car was basically a fishbowl, all clear, untinted windows that you could easily see whether or not I was inside, so there was no reason to be pressed up to my windows, looking in like he was. "Yeah, I got no cash on me. Sorry, man," I said, walking around him to get back in my car. But to my surprise, he didn't leave. He actually tried to start another conversation, asking me what brought me out here tonight. I'm on a road trip. I'm sorry, but I really need to get some sleep. I can't really talk right now." I got in my car, and the guy did a sorry wave, then walked down to the other car and got in. I was a bit relieved to see he got in the car, and wasn't just a homeless person being creepy at a random rest stop. To be honest though, I think I was too tired to even feel uncomfortable or care what that man was up to. I just wanted to sleep. Thinking back on it though, and in a normal state of mind, I probably would have just left and gone to the next rest stop. I reorganized the mess in my front seat, tossing everything in the back, then leaned my seats as far back as I could and tried to get comfortable. I had my eyes shut for just a few minutes before I could tell some lights were moving around outside my car, which made me open my eyes to see what it was. I sat up, seeing in the mirror that that guy had moved his car right up behind mine. I watched for a minute, unsure why he'd moved at all, but with things getting a little too creepy, I knew I had to take the L and just find somewhere else to sleep. I pulled my seat back up, tossed my car in drive, and got back on the highway. I had a few unfriendly words to say under my breath about that dude as I pulled away. There weren't a lot of places to stop at on this stretch of road, so this inconvenience was going to cost me at least 30 to 40 minutes. It was dangerous how tired I was on this drive. My eyelids would close for a second or two, then shoot back open once I realized I was dozing off. This pretty much went on and off the whole way, until finally I reached the next rest stop. Or what was a rest stop. It looked very similar to the other one, except it was without a doubt abandoned or out of service. The building was all taped up and decaying, and graffiti covered most of the exterior. Still, it was a place to pull off, and I figured I wouldn't have any issues sleeping here just for a few hours. Not sure if it was because the place was quiet and abandoned, or me just being really tired, but I passed out within a minute. I have to say, before I woke up, I got some pretty good sleep. I think I slept from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. before I woke up violently to a crash against my car. The whole car shook as I scrambled to figure out what the hell happened. I looked in my left mirror, seeing a car's headlights parked right behind me. Then I looked in the right mirror. There was a man right beside my car with a metal baseball bat. He swung it again, bursting the back window. I kept yelling "what the fuck" over and over, trying to get my keys and get away. The man came up to the passenger window, where I then saw it was the guy from the other rest stop. He had this sinister smile and started taunting me, saying "liar" repeatedly, as he kept swinging the bat against my car, then staring at me with that smile and calling me a liar again. I didn't know what he was talking about, but I was able to get the car on and leave before it got worse. I called 911, phone shaking in my hand as I drove away. I was able to meet up with an officer at a gas station, where I explained the incident and was able to take note of the damage to my car. 2 windows were shattered, and dents were scattered all over the doors. and somehow I didn't notice that my back right tire was also slashed and almost flat. Another officer went to the abandoned rest stop, finding all the glass shards on the ground, but the man was already long gone. They notified all the patrol cars of the man's appearance and vehicle, but came up empty-handed. After being stuck in an unknown town for a few days to get my car fixed, I was able to make it home safely. It's crazy how insane some people are. I mean, I assume that guy lost his shit over something as simple as me not giving him a few bucks for the vending machine, or even just not wanting to talk to him at 1 a.m. on the side of a highway. The fact that I could have died that night over something so absurd is horrifying.
This happened to me 3 months ago, and I can't stop thinking about it. I'm a college sophomore, and for about a year, I was working as a delivery driver for a popular local restaurant. For the most part, the delivery locations were not far from the city. But then, at 11 p.m. on a random Thursday, I got an order for 2 plain cheeseburgers with fries and a Coke, with instructions to hand it to the customer. Not a super unusual order, until I checked the location and found that it was in the middle of nowhere. I didn't really have an option to decline the order though, so I got the bag and headed out. As I got closer, an eerie feeling started to set in. The road became narrow and winding, and I hadn't seen anything, not even a gas station, in miles. When I finally reached the destination, I met an even more unsettling sight. The house I parked in front of seemed vacant, abandoned for years. It looked like it was turning black from some kind of soot, and there wasn't a single light on inside. I was sure I was being pranked by some stupid kids, which had happened before. However, I decided to do my due diligence and try my best to complete the delivery. I got out of my car with the bag, walked up onto the porch, and rang the doorbell. I was surprised it even still worked. The button had a weight to it and felt very mechanical, and the sound of it was like actual large bronze bells tolling from inside. I don't know why, but it gave me chills. A minute went by, but nobody came to the door. I knocked for good measure, but still, it seemed clear that the house was empty. I gave up and started walking back to my car. Almost as soon as I turned away, though, I got the sudden feeling that I was being watched. I tried to ignore it, but about halfway there, I couldn't resist the urge to look back. I almost couldn't believe my eyes when I saw the shadow of someone in the attic window, casting the drapes from a dim light that wasn't there before. It was literally like when someone in a horror movie sees a ghost inside a window for a split second. But when I blinked, it was still there. The drapes parted, revealing a middle-aged man. Then, just as quickly as he appeared, he left the window. I assumed he was going down to the door, but I didn't move to meet him just yet. I kept my distance. A few moments later, the door opened, and inside stood the same man from the window. Again backlit from a puny incandescent light bulb hanging from a chain. One that I knew had not been on just a minute ago. I still did not walk toward the house. There was a palpable stench pouring out of the open door, an odor I'd never smelled before in my life. Instead, I tried confirming the order from where I stood. I said the name on the ticket, as well as the contents, asking if it was him. He nodded slowly, and said the exact words that still haunt me. "Come closer. I want to eat." I literally could not move. I wanted to drop the food on the ground and run back to my car, but this man's gaze was like a tractor beam trying to pull me into the house. After a moment of terrifying silence, the man said, "Fine, I'll come to you." He then stepped down from the porch and began walking toward me, gradually entering the cone of my car headlights, which I left on. The brighter the lights got on him, the more details I could see, and they rapidly stacked on top of each other. His clothes were ragged and torn, and soaked in multiple layers of stains. The seemingly oldest ones were gray, but as they became fresher, they turned brown. Then finally, a dark red. Blood, as if it couldn't get any worse. His gait was imbalanced, like he was holding something close to his hips with one hand. Finally, when he was about 10 feet from me, I snapped out of it. I threw the bag at him, then turned and sprinted back to my car. I got in faster than I ever had, slamming the door and locking it in one motion. The next thing I saw was a knife in my face. I screamed as it thrusted at me, but then it struck the glass. I was so scared I thought it had somehow phased through the window. I collected myself, then grabbed my keys out of my pocket, shoving them into the ignition with shaking hands. At the same moment that I turned the keys and I heard the engine roar to life, I heard a loud pop and hissing from outside the car. The man was leaning over, grinning at me, and I realized he had just slashed my tire. Before things could get any worse, I floored it. I nearly crashed into the house before I got control and circled around it. Then I raced down the driveway and back onto the road. I didn't care that I was driving on a flat. I drove about 5 miles before I finally found a gas station, where I parked and told the clerk what my situation was. I didn't have a spare, so he helped me call a tow truck, who took my car to a shop that was closed until the morning, then was nice enough to drop me off at my work. I explained everything that happened to my boss, who called the cops, saying I should have done so a long time ago. He was right, but I was so shaken that I never thought to. The cops got my story, then went to investigate the house. According to the call I got a couple weeks later, they found nothing there. The investigation is still ongoing, but it's pretty clear that Sicko in the house had his victim captive and tortured him for a long time before finally killing him. Every time I think about this, I can't stop thinking about how close I came to becoming that monster's next victim.
I'm a delivery guy, but not a pizza delivery guy. I'm a long-haul trucker delivering all manner of things, usually washing machines or games consoles or fridges. Things you'd think are safe to transport, but you'd be surprised what people will heist. Now, true story, a truck carrying the entire U.S. shipment of the Killing Joke action figures got robbed at gunpoint recently. Google it if you don't believe me. Anyway, when this went down, I was on a cross-country haul to Albany from Dallas. I'm legally not allowed to say what exactly I was carrying, but let's just say it was very expensive, very desirable equipment of the medical variety. The kind of cargo that'd make me a bit more jumpy than microwave ovens or custom kitchen deliveries. If you get that reference, congrats, you're an old man like I am. The journey was said to be just over 24 hours, which meant that there was a rest stop and a few hours sleep on my itinerary. I timed things so I'd get to stop at one of my favorite rest stops in Kentucky at around midnight. They had a killer 24-hour diner there, and some other truckers I'd become familiar with over time often stopped there too, so we'd meet up and shoot the breeze. Imagine my disappointment when I pulled into the truck stop, only to discover that the diner was closed for refurbishments, and the only other vehicle in the lot was a beat-up old Range Rover that looked like it had been abandoned there months ago. Nobody was answering the CB radio either, just a completely dead night. Ah well, I thought, it happens. I always planned for such eventualities, and I'd packed a bunch of healthy, well-rounded meal options such as Slim Jims, Twinkies, Cheetos, and Mountain Dew. You know, all that good stuff that helps keep my trucker bod slim and svelte. I chowed down on some dried meats, mainlined a Twinkie or four, and listened to a couple of CDs, and then decided to catch a few hours sleep before continuing on. Normally on the road I sleep like a baby. I just slip into the passenger seat, recline it a little, and I'm out like a shot. That night, though, no dice. Something felt off. Maybe it was the diner with all the lights off. Maybe it was the empty truck stop lot. Maybe it was the flickering street lamp near the turnoff. Now, I'm not a superstitious man. I can't explain it. I just had a bad feeling. Real bad. Like something about the whole place was wrong. Now, let me stress this here. I'd been to this truck stop at least a dozen times in the past. It was a favorite, but it was usually a hub of activity, even in the middle of the night. Being here alone felt like I'd crossed some kind of portal, like I was in another world. I really am not the kind of guy who falls into this type of thinking, though, I promise. I love horror movies precisely because they don't scare me. Yeah, I get a little paranoid about my cargo getting robbed very occasionally, and I guess that played into it here. But this was something else, man. It sounds like a cliche, but it was like an ill wind was blowing, and I mean that figuratively and literally. It had been a calm night, but as soon as I parked, the wind kicked up, dust and leaves and debris billowing up around the parking lot. Then there was the abandoned Range Rover. I could swear the windows had been busted out. Was it burned up? I couldn't tell. And then a voice in the back of my head was telling me to go check it out. I had my trusty sidekick, Kirsty. Kirsty's my shotgun. Don't go anywhere without her. If I'm not supposed to have her, then I have a hiding place and, well, I'm not going to implicate myself, but she stays with me at all times in the truck. The idea of walking over to this abandoned car, though, just gave me the full-on, unfiltered heebie-jeebies. And the more I thought about it, the more it started bothering me. My mind started drifting towards various possibilities, and then it started drifting in general until suddenly I was falling asleep. I was nodding off into dreamland. At that moment, I heard a knock, knock, knock. And holy freaking Christmas, I jolted awake. Was I dreaming? Knock, knock, knock again. A little quieter this time, but someone was tapping on the driver's side window. And as I mentioned, I sleep in the passenger seat, and with the truck cab light off, I couldn't really see who was knocking. I could just see the vague shape of a human. I flicked the interior light on, which made it even harder to see who was out there, and I gestured for them to come around to the passenger side, hoping they'd get the hint. And then, it was like they just disappeared, like they ducked down out of view. What the hell? I shut off the interior light. A minute had passed, and then 2, and I was starting to think that I'd imagined it, and I'd still been dreaming. Knock, knock, knock again, harder. This time right next to me, the passenger side window. And I jumped up. Okay, this wasn't cool. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove compartment and shone it at the visitor. He was dressed in a pizza delivery outfit, a very well-known brand. He had the jacket and he had the cap, brim pulled down low over his face. He didn't seem bothered by the flashlight shining right in his face, but I angled it away regardless and then, against my better judgment, wound down the window. "Can I help you, buddy?" I asked. The pizza delivery guy seemed to grin at me. "I got the pizza you ordered, my friend," he said. I had not ordered a pizza. I was in the middle of an abandoned truck stop. My phone didn't have reception. The only way I could have ordered pizza was over the CB radio, and, well, obviously I hadn't. I explained this to him, and not once did this guy's grin falter. I could barely see him in the darkness, but his smile was like this bright white catching the light reflecting off of it. The pizza delivery guy reeled off some real name and said that no, definitely the pizza was mine and I'd ordered it. I reiterated that I had not and I didn't want pizza. In truth, I did, absolutely, but I wasn't accepting a strange pizza from a strange grinning guy. Now I shone that flashlight at him again, and that's when I noticed the absolute state of his uniform. If this guy was a Domino's employee, then his uniform had not been replaced since probably the 90s. It was torn. It was filthy. His cap was ripped with bits of hair sticking through places, and the logo was partially unstitched. "Buddy, just move along," I said. "I don't want your pizza." He told me he couldn't do that I had paid for the pizza, and he'd be in a lot of trouble if I didn't accept the food I'd paid for. I reached for Kirsty. Usually, Kirsty's appearance causes even the most aggressive weirdo to back down. Not this guy. I still couldn't see his eyes, but his smile grew wider, almost admiring. He held up the pizza box. "You really don't want this pizza?" he said, and my stomach growled. And that's when he tilted his head back and I saw his eyes, or more accurately, his eye. His left eye was bloodshot, wide and staring, and his right eye was just missing. It was covered, not by an eye patch, but gauze. And for a moment he stopped smiling, and somehow that was a relief. And then I cocked Kirsty. "Listen, buddy, I'm gonna drive off now. I suggest you step back," I said. No way was I staying here any longer. I'd find somewhere else down the line to rest. No! His sudden yell made me jump, and I cursed myself for being fearful. The smile didn't leave his face, though, but his eye looked almost sad. It's your pizza. You have to take the pizza. I'm going to put it on the ground and leave, and then you can get it. And with that, the pizza guy in the filthy uniform walked straight backwards, placed the pizza on the ground, and then continued to walk backwards towards that Range Rover, never once taking his eyes off me. Finally, when he was far enough away, he did turn and got in the car. I heard the engine start and he drove off, and sure enough, in the glare from his vehicle's headlights, I could see that all the windows had been smashed. I know I should have just driven off, but I was curious. Clutching my shotgun, I climbed out the truck and walked over to the pizza. I picked it up, opened the box, and reared back. There was a pizza inside, but it was clearly about a week old. It was moldy, rancid, reeking. Maggots crawled all over the surface, and I recoiled and tossed it across the lot. Then something occurred to me. I went to the back of the truck to check the doors. Had I been robbed or scammed somehow? No, the truck was still locked up tight, but scratched into the paint were 2 words. Don't eat. I hopped into the driver's seat and hightailed it out of there. I didn't stop until I reached Albany. Kirsty did not leave the seat next to me for that entire trip, and I have no explanation as to what happened. Now, I don't believe in anything supernatural, and the man clearly was flesh and blood. I'm pretty sure it was just a couple of tweakers who wanted to put the spooks up some hapless trucker, maybe rob them. And if that was their plan, it worked. While it scared the crap out of me, it has given me an excellent story to tell over the CB radio over the years. However, on the downside, I've never been able to look at pizza the same way again. So no need for a preamble or anything, just know that when this played out, it was the early 2000s, and I was a 20-year-old woman working a pizza delivery job to help pay my way through college. I was based in a city, so we had so many different customers it was hard to keep track of regulars. One regular order I did remember, though, was this really sweet old couple who lived in a small suburban bungalow. They usually just ordered a pizza and some other stuff on a Friday night, so I was a little surprised when one day we got an order to their address for like 8 huge pizzas. So we get everything cooked and I take the delivery because I love this old couple and we usually chatted for a few minutes, and the tip was a nice bonus too. So I get to the house, and even before I knock on the door, something seems wrong. Loud, pumping techno is coming from what seems to be the basement. I knock and the door gets opened. I'm not 100% sure, but I am 99.9% sure that the person who opened the door wasn't either of the old people. In fact, this person was dressed in a black and white wolf fursuit, and I guess he was nonverbal because he gestured to the pizzas, pulled out his pocket to show it was empty, and then did a sort of fake crying gesture before pointing for me to come inside. Now, going inside a customer's house is usually a huge no-no, but I normally would drop in on this couple, and I was concerned about them as well as being morbidly curious. I move to follow the fursuit wolf into the house, and as he turns around, I realize, oh, it's one of those furries. I can tell because, well, his fursuit includes assless chaps, and I tried to avert my eyes and made the stupid mistake of stepping over the threshold of the house, and the front door clicked shut behind me. I turned to see a moth-eaten looking bear standing there, and I swear to God, you know that creepy blowjob bear from The Shining? This guy made that character look like Yogi. The way I can describe this fursona was a bear wolf. I just wanted to know what happened to my old couple. So I took the pizzas through the kitchen and put them down on the counter, and told old assless chaps wolf in no uncertain terms that I needed payment. And also, I'd really appreciate knowing where Mr. and Mrs. Smith were. The wolf and the bear both mimed laughter, as if this was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. Now, I know, please don't scream at me for this next bit. They gestured toward the basement where the techno music was coming from, and Against everything I've ever learned from every horror movie and listening to Let's Read, I followed them. And Christ almighty, there was every kind of animal thing you can imagine. An owl dressed in leather bondage, a unicorn showing off almost everything, cartoon cats in diapers, and at the center of everything was a man wearing a bat mask and a cape. And I know that he was a man because that's all he was wearing. And there was my beloved old couple, sitting on a couch, looking absolutely terrified. "Are you guys okay?" I asked them. Mr. Smith looked at me, and Mrs. Smith looked like she was about to burst into tears. "Our grandson came to visit," she said, gesturing to the assless chap's werewolf. "And he brought some friends," Mr. Smith said. I had no idea what to do. The furries hadn't done anything directly threatening, but I still felt unsafe and uncomfortable, and clearly so did this older couple. That's when I saw the table set up in the corner with what was very obviously a makeshift meth production lab. Now I hurried over to the old couple, saying, "Come on, we're leaving," and they both got up. We made it to the basement stairs and then up the hallway. We were nearly home free. And then the bear reared its ugly head, and Mrs. Smith began to cry. Then from downstairs, a low but audible explosion. Suddenly, furries were streaming out of the basement, coughing, screaming, yelling. The naked Batman came barreling past us, swinging free in the open air as he dived out the front door. The grandson, the assless chap's wolf, literally shoved his grandmother out of the way to get to safety. I caught her, dragging both her and Mr. Smith out into the lawn. We took in the fresh air just in time for another explosion to rock the house. Flames began to spread from the basement into the hallway. Furries were fleeing left and right. Mrs. Smith continued to cry. Mrs. Smith just stood there shaking his head, and the grandson leaped into a car with that bear, and the pair of them took off. Soon, nearly all the furries were gone. The only one who remained was the naked man-bat, and I'm so grateful that he did, because he testified as to exactly what happened, even if it meant outing his double life as a lawyer with a fetish bat persona. Props to him. Not all heroes wear capes, although this one did, and only a cape. I did stop delivering to that old couple, though. Things just felt different after that, and while the story may seem borderline comedic, it was genuinely one of the most terrifying moments of my life, barely making it out in time. So it was a busy show, and the movie was The Silence of the Lambs. I didn't know much about it, and I hadn't read the book. All I knew was that my buddy had told me that it was gnarly and that we had to go. And then, when the time came, he canceled on me an hour before the movie started, and I just decided to go by myself. There wasn't an empty seat in the house, though. The commercials had started as I made my way down the aisle and squeezed along the road to my seat. A few mutters and mumbles from the moviegoers I squished past, and then I finally just jumped into my seat. Now, the guy next to me was wearing a very thick old coat and what I actually recognized to be a Tribly, even though it was spring and the theater was fairly stuffy. I apologized for bumping into him, and I thought that I heard some sort of grunt or belch or whatever gross. And so I just sat there, and my God, the guy's body odor was not pleasant. I took a deep inhale of my popcorn and hoped that that would help, and by the time the movie started, it got easier to just ignore the guy. Now, Silence of the Lambs starts off as a very tense movie and only gets more tense from there. Occasionally, I felt my theater neighbor's shoulder brush against mine and kind of nudge him back over to the left. I couldn't hear any snoring, but I was sure that I could feel the occasional vibration of a snore at least. And in the end, as the movie got more and more terrifying and gripping, the act of nudging the guy off my shoulder became kind of instinct. I ate my popcorn and nachos, finished my soda, and I somehow made it through the whole movie without needing to get up and use the bathroom, which was great because imagine how many people I'd have made angry in the crowded theater. And that's why when the movie ended and I was stuck there in the middle of the center aisle, surrounded on all sides by crowds, I decided to just wait it out. I watched all the credits until the lights started to go up and it looked like I had a clear path to the right from which I could actually exit. That's when I realized the guy next to me was still there. I didn't want to just leave him there asleep, and it would kind of suck if he missed the entire movie too, So I gave him on the tap of the shoulder, saying, "Hey buddy, you okay?" Now I'm sure you Let's Read listeners have worked out the twist here. As I gently nudged his shoulder, the man, or should I say his body, slumped over to the left, and his hat fell off. In the rising lights of the theater, I could see it now. This dude was dead. D-E-A-D. Absolutely stone cold dead. I don't mean he dropped dead in the last 10 minutes either. I mean, I'd clearly been sitting next to a corpse for the entire showing of that movie. So how did he make a sound? Why was I sure that I could hear and feel him? Now, cops kind of explained this to me later, and when I first nudged him, I'd likely just caused some gas to escape his body. And during the point of decomposition he was at, the body starts to bloat with gas, which could have caused the vibration and the occasional feeling of him moving. I never did get to find out exactly what happened to the guy. They were able to tell me enough that the cause of death wasn't suspicious, so I just kind of replied with natural causes. And the cop looks a bit weird and says that he can't really say any more. And for a while, that kind of bothered me. How can you die in a non-suspicious manner but not of natural causes? And that kind of stuck with me. This old guy had gone to that theater alone, likely taken some kind of overdose, and allowed himself to just sort of drift off peacefully in his sleep. What he took, I don't know, because fatal overdoses are usually messy, painful, and ugly. But clearly he got hold of something that let him die peacefully during the previous showing of The Silence of the Lambs. It always bothered me how he wasn't discovered by a theater employee in between the showings. He'd possibly been sitting there for 3 showings of that damn movie and nobody noticed but me. I mean, it wasn't the cleanest theater, but good God, did they not even check the screens between showings? And the final thing that bothers me is, why did he choose The Silence of the Lambs as the final thing he ever saw? It's not exactly a nice movie to just sort of slip away to. Maybe it was the only movie showing that was relatively empty when he got there, which would have been that afternoon, I guess. Maybe there was something in the film he related to. Or maybe he was simply haunted by his own lambs that he needed to silence.
Back in 2018, I went out with my friends, Alex and Abriana. There was very little to do in our town, especially because we were too young to drink at the time. I remember we were all angstier than ever, getting fed up with living in the middle of nowhere. We'd gotten so desperate for fun that we cared very little about the consequences of what we had started getting up to. We were still minors, so it didn't really matter if we got caught, right? One night, at around 1 a.m., after being shitheads for several hours, we were hanging out at IHOP, one of the few places open in the middle of the night. While we were waiting for our food over some coffee, we talked a lot about how we wished something out of the ordinary would happen, and complained about how our town was such a depressing, boring place to live. We'd come to regret that conversation, but the karma came on so slowly that we didn't even notice at first. We were interrupted by some shouting, not super loud or aggressive, but stern. The seasoned, no-nonsense waitress was telling a woman who had just come in that she couldn't have her dog in the restaurant. Sure enough, the woman and her dog were both dirty and disheveled, clearly homeless. We heard her say something back about how she needed somewhere safe to stay, but the waitress wasn't having it and kicked her out. We thought little of it. Our food came out minutes later, but almost as soon as we started eating, there was another interruption. This time it was a man, equally as rough-looking as the woman from before. But he was the one shouting, and much more aggressively. He wouldn't stop saying, "Where's my girl? I know she's in here. Where is she?" My friends and I kept our heads down, listening with uneasy smirks on our faces until the waitress threatened to call the cops. Then he left. When he was gone, we dug into our food, but not as hungrily as we could have. We were talking about the man and the woman we assumed were connected. Half concerned, half amused, speculating what was up with them or where they'd gone. However, by the end of the meal, we had moved on. We were recharged and ready to get up to more trouble. It had been long enough that we figured the people who were fighting would be long gone, so we didn't even consider them. Leaving IHOP, we roamed the streets, looking for a wall to tag or a yard decoration to steal and destroy, whatever could satisfy us. After about 20 minutes of searching, we seemed to find the perfect hit. A freshly abandoned house. It was a place we'd all seen before, but the moments never felt right until that night. We were sure nobody had been there in weeks, and unlike the other abandoned places in town, it didn't seem like a total death trap yet. The windows were broken, the siding was falling off, and the room had some holes, but the structure looked solid. Not wanting to be seen entering off the street, we snuck around to the backyard. There was a wooden fence surrounding it, but despite the condition of the house, there were no easy gaps to squeeze through, so we climbed over it. In the backyard, we had to tread carefully. There was rusted out junk everywhere, just waiting to send us to the doctor for a tetanus shot. We had crept about halfway to the back door when we heard something bone-chilling. A woman crying. It sounded like it was coming from inside the house. We froze in our places. A moment later, a dog started barking at us from the house. Now we knew we had been made, so we started to make our way back to the fence. When all of a sudden, the back door flew open. A man with a giant knife in his hand came charging out. We turned our backs and ran for our lives as the man screamed that he was going to kill us. We made it to the fence and started frantically climbing. I was the last one to get over the top and jump down. But when I did, I landed wrong and twisted the shit out of my ankle. I shouted in agony, watching my friends keep running away. I called out to them to come back and help me, but they were too panicked to realize they had left me behind. Then, I turned my head to look back at the fence, to see if I was about to be stabbed to death. There was a face staring at me, looking just over the edge. It had pure rage in its eyes, nothing else, no humanity whatsoever. It was the man we'd seen harassing the waitress at IHOP less than an hour earlier. Somehow he must have found the frightened woman with the dog, and we had stumbled right into the place he was holding her. I was sure he was about to jump over the fence and slit my throat. But strangely, he just kept staring at me, not moving, like he wasn't even breathing. Finally, I pushed past the pain and tried to stand. I fell the instant I put my weight on my twisted ankle. I started to crawl, calling my friends to get me. I crawled on my own for probably about 50 feet before they made their way back and helped me get off the ground. When they stood me up, I looked over my shoulder, and the man was still staring at us, at me. I looked away, deciding it was best not to mention it at the time. I told them a day later. By then, I'd been taken to the hospital to find out my ankle wasn't just twisted, but broken. We had a serious discussion about our brush with death, realizing it wasn't just the cops we had to worry about catching us. There were far worse fates. After that night, we conducted ourselves with far more caution, deciding it was better to be bored than dead. Still, I always felt bad about leaving that woman alone with the man she was trying to get away from, the same one that almost killed me. I hate to think about what happened to her in that house, and why she was crying. This happened about 4 or 5 years ago. I was still a child who loved spending summer evenings outside with my friends. I live in a small village in Eastern Europe, where not much happens and everyone knows each other. Most of the houses are clustered together in one area along a country road. However, on the very edge of the village, on a hill about 300 meters from the road and all the other houses, there's a lonely one, without doors, without windows. I didn't pay much attention to it until I was 15. Even though my friends and I often passed the narrow, overgrown path that led up to it when we were going to play in the nearby field. It seemed like a simple house under construction. One day, however, my friend and I were passing by, and we started asking ourselves questions about it. We realized we had never seen anyone work on it, and had no idea who the owner was. For as long as either of us could remember, it had been in the exact same unfinished state. When I got home, I asked my parents about the house, and although they had both lived here since they were little, neither of them could give me an answer. This piqued my curiosity even more. The next day, my friend and I started asking around the village. No one knew much. Some said the owner had died suddenly. Others figured he had moved to another country and abandoned it. It was certain that the place had a strange air about it, but we couldn't seem to get any satisfying information. So we moved on for the day and left to play football. We had to pass by the house on the way to the field, of course. And it was like the place was taunting us. Hours later, we were about to go home because the sun was starting to set. Just as we got back on the road, we bumped into my friend's uncle, who was returning from his visit to the neighboring village about 7 kilometers away. He was very old, the eldest person in the village, and made this journey on foot as often as he could, claiming it kept him young. Realizing he might know something about that house, we asked him directly. There were 3 seconds of silence where the old man seemed scared and confused, like we'd unearthed a terrible memory. He looked us in the eye and said, "Don't ever go there," then hurried away, leaving us with more questions than ever. On the way home, we had to pass that very house. We'd done it hundreds of times, but that day, it was different. As we were walking by, the house made a loud creaking sound. It was strange because the house had no doors or windows, just holes in the walls. So we assumed it came from that rotten board blocking off the entrance. We were curious, yet scared, but curiosity won. Wanting to finally put it to rest, we slowly walked up the hill. As we got closer to the house, something felt off. The air got colder, even though it was still summer. Not freezing, but like a cold draft you'd feel when opening a cellar door. It was unnatural. We didn't talk anymore. Not a word. When we reached the entrance, we pushed the rotten board aside. Inside, it was dead silent. No wind, no insects, nothing. The concrete walls were stained. The air smelled like mold and something else, something sweet, almost metallic. Like old blood, but faint. We carefully stepped inside, our footsteps echoing slightly as we cast our phone flashlights into the darkness. I remember feeling like someone was watching me from one of the window holes. I felt certain we weren't alone, but I couldn't prove it. We moved from room to room, each blocked by wooden planks we either slid aside or stepped over. When we reached the last room, the air was so cold my skin prickled up. And then, there it was, on the floor near the middle of the room. A doll, old, dirty, missing one eye. At the same moment, my phone started ringing. I didn't understand how it was possible. I had 0 signal, as if my connection was completely lost. But my phone was ringing, and on the screen it said, "Unknown." I froze. I showed it to my friend. He turned pale. I didn't even think to answer. I just declined. But a second after that, a sound flooded the air. A long, low sigh. It didn't sound human, but it wasn't like an animal either. It sounded like it came from inside the walls, like someone was exhaling after holding their breath for years. We didn't hesitate for a second. I just remember both of us turning at the same time and sprinting, jumping through the nearest window opening, not even caring if we scraped ourselves on the way out. We didn't stop running until we were back in the safety of the village. My friend's house was closest, so we went there. Once we had time to calm down a bit, my friend's uncle came back into the house from bathing after his day of walking. He took one look at us and knew we had gone into the house. First, he scolded us for being stupid and not listening to him. Then he finally told us what he knew about the house. He said that a long time ago, a family had started building a house there. But then, there was a tragic accident inside it that killed their little girl. After her death, the house was abandoned, and no one knows what happened to the family. My uncle led us to believe the house was cursed. That night, we believed it. However, since then, I've tried to think of a more rational explanation. Were animals hiding in there, or even people? I can never say for sure. Sometimes I can't stop looking at that house. Every now and then, at night, I swear I see a glimpse of candlelight glowing in one of the windows. But then my own blink snuffs it out. No matter what, I've never stepped foot in that house since. and I never will. It was a hot summer night. I knew I wasn't going to get any sleep due to the heat, so I asked a close friend at the time if she wanted to meet up at the beach in the evening. She said yes, and told me she would bring her camera to take photos for her Instagram. I arrived at the meetup point before her, so I looked around and observed the area. Not much stood out, except I noticed two older guys glancing at me every now and then from across the street. I looked back at them a few times to make sure they were aware of them, but in the time I was waiting there, nothing else happened. Soon my friend arrived and I forgot about them. We were about a 30-minute walk from the beach, as we had planned to stop at some of the shops in the artsy little beach town. When we eventually got to the beach, we got some great shots of the sea and each other before the sun started to set. And we got some stellar shots of that too. Then we started asking people if we could take photos of them, and plenty of amazing people agreed. University students doing group yoga on the beach, an elderly couple dancing to music, a mother playing with her baby. It was going perfectly, and the lighting was incredible. After a while, the sun had gone away, and we had taken plenty of pictures for my friend's Instagram. We took an empty back street, as it was the fastest route to get to a cafe I wanted to show her. The back streets were usually safe, but I guess I wasn't used to walking around there at night. At some point, out of the corner of my eye, I saw two men quickly crossing the street. They got in front of us and stopped us, and it was at this moment I realized they were the same men I saw looking at me earlier. My heart jumped. One guy was slightly buff, but the other was quite skinny, both in their mid-30s. Once they were fully blocking our way, they asked us to take photos of them. Alarms started blaring in my head. We were at least 10 minutes from the beach, so they shouldn't have seen us taking photos of other people there. What would make them rush across the street and ask us to do something like that with no context? I felt like screaming no, but my friend, who had never seen these guys before, agreed. It was annoyingly common for her to be like that, super kind and people-pleasing. I just smiled and nodded at the guys. They were eerily emotionless. They kept a deadpan face as they spoke, betraying the fake niceness in their voices. While my friend was taking photos of them doing various poses, I watched awkwardly. They kept looking over at me instead of the camera, never showing a single hint of emotion no matter what position they were in. It was like they were living mannequins. When the mini photo shoot was done, the skinny guy placed his hat on my friend's head. She laughed and thanked him, but it made my stomach churn as I now knew this was going to go further than just photos. Just as I suspected, the men suggested we get drinks together, still not smiling in the slightest. I elbowed my friend to tell her we should get out of this, but she ignored me. Instead, she actually cheered and said she was really thirsty, giving these robotic men her most enthusiastic excitement. It was so insane that I felt dizzy, even though I had told her the cafe we were headed to was open. The men lied and claimed that it was too late, so only bars would be open. This was when I finally butted in and said we were too young to drink, which was true. The buff guy just laughed and said it didn't matter because he would buy drinks for us, but I couldn't even think of a response to that. I just stood there with a look of shock and dread on my face. And that fear, that show of helplessness, was what finally made their facade start to crack. A smirk spread across the thinner man's face, sending shivers down my spine. I grabbed my friend by the wrist and started begging her to leave, whispering that this all just felt wrong. My friend and I had a sidebar conversation at that moment, and while she was stupidly saying it would be fine, the two men kept trying to convince us to go. They even started to move closer to us, and then one of them gripped my shoulder, silencing me mid-sentence. I turned my head in horror and saw the most gut-wrenching sight in my life. The buff man had grabbed a hold of me, and in his other hand, hidden at his waist, was a knife. My instincts took over. I still had my friend by the wrist, so I just bolted. I felt the man's grip on my shoulder tighten, almost hard enough to hold me back, but I barely managed to slip away. I hadn't screamed or anything. I just grabbed my friend and ran. Then I didn't stop until I dragged her into a more populated area. I think if I had wasted the breath, we wouldn't have gotten away. But this left my airheaded friend confused and pissed at me. She just couldn't get it through her head that those guys were bad news. Even as we were getting into a cab, so we didn't have to leave on foot, I pointed the men out to her. They were still watching us from across the street, just like they were from the start, and probably had been all evening. I could still see the glint of metal in the larger man's hand, but my friend refused to believe he was holding a weapon, claiming it was probably just his phone. This story was what made me stop talking to that friend. She thought I was over-exaggerating and said I was being annoying by mentioning it so much. I might have saved her life, and she can't even say thanks. To think she's out there, navigating the world on her own. It's a wonder how she's still alive. This story happened when I was living in Boston. I was 24 and had recently moved there to live with my best friend. I got a job at a massage envy in Back Bay to cover bills. At the time this happened, I had only been working there for a month. Since I was new, I often had to work the closing shift. One night after closing the shop around 9:45 p.m., I said goodbye to my coworker and started walking to the bus stop a couple blocks over. Walking alone had never been a problem until that night. There were a few other people out walking, but other than that, the square was dark and quiet. Then, I noticed a man walking a short distance behind me. At first I didn't think anything of it, assuming he was just going the same direction as me. After a block though, he caught up and started to walk right next to me, as if we were together and heading to the same place. My heart began to beat faster as my full attention was drawn to him, trying to figure out what the hell he was up to. He was a tall white man, wearing a long brown pea coat and gloves. He had a briefcase with him. Nothing about his appearance was all that creepy, but the look on his face was deeply unsettling. For reference, I'm a short African-American female, so I had reason to be afraid he might want to do something to me, and had the physical ability to do it. The longer we walked, the more nervous I got. I was alone. It was dark, and there was no one else around. On top of that, there really weren't any places open to duck into, but I could see the bus stop ahead. It was empty. And even though the buses ran regularly, there was no guarantee how long the bus would take. I dreaded the thought of waiting there alone with him. He was still walking next to me while all of this went through my head, frantically trying to think of what to do. My thoughts were interrupted when he asked, "Are you from here?" I said I was, but he replied so quickly it was like he knew I was lying. "I have drinks in a hotel room," he said. "I'd love you to come back with me." I declined trying to be polite, but my hands were already shaking in my pockets. As we kept walking, the man was insistent that I go with him, and that it would be a fun time. I didn't want to get forceful with him because I didn't know how he'd react. At last I saw CVS just up ahead. I mumbled something about having to go and ran into the store, not knowing if he'd follow me, but needing someone, anyone else to be around. Once in the store, I called my best guy friend. He didn't even live in the city, but I was so scared by this point I couldn't think clearly enough to call the cops or tell the store clerk what was going on. He stayed on the phone with me while I pretended to browse the aisles. For a moment it seemed like the man had lost track of me. But then, as I was turning to go down an aisle, I suddenly came face to face with him. We both stopped and looked at each other, a sinister grin now on his face as I freaked out internally. Still on the phone with my guy friend, I started to make things up about how I would be home and ready to eat dinner soon. I was banking on the hope that if the man heard someone was waiting for me, he would know it would set alarm bells off if I didn't show up. It seemed to work for the moment, as the man walked past me and I continued down the aisle in the opposite direction. I went to wait by the entrance, staring out the window at the bus stop. The CVS was closing in 20 minutes, so if it didn't show up soon, I'd have to go out there and wait by myself. Thankfully, the bus came just a few minutes later. I didn't even look behind me and raced onto the bus. Once I sat down, I looked at the door and tried to force it closed with my mind. But then, my stomach dropped as the man walked in at the last second. I froze in terror, watching him walk closer and closer, then sit down in the seat right next to me. The bus drove off, and the next few minutes were the longest of my life. Nothing happened at first, just agonizing stillness. But then I felt him place his hand on my knee. I wanted to cry and scream and take his hand away, but I didn't know what he would do if I did. I just sat there and tried not to lose it. When my stop came up, I pulled the cord and the driver pulled over. The man got out of the seat and motioned for me to walk ahead of him. My whole body was shaking. I didn't know what to do. So I got up and tried to be calm, hoping I could ask the driver to help me. I took 3 steps forward. Then I heard a man call out from behind me saying, "Hey buddy, let me talk to you." I looked over my shoulder, and someone I hadn't even seen sitting in the back of the bus had gotten up and stopped the man by grabbing his shoulder. I didn't have time to think. I took the opportunity to get off the bus. Then I ran into my apartment building. I told my friend about what happened immediately. We were both creeped out by it, and I had a horrible time sleeping that night. I couldn't stop thinking about what that man really wanted to do to me if I actually ended up in his hotel room. I'm glad that CVS was open, and I'm even more thankful to the random stranger who saw what was going on and calmly gave me the out that I needed. If not for them, I don't know how that night would have ended. This happened very recently in June of 2025. I was, and still am, 16 years old. I was on a trip with my mom and her boyfriend to his home country. I won't say where exactly, as I don't want people to think I'm stereotyping the people that live there when I talk about what happened to me. On the day this happened, I was wearing a long skirt, long tankini-style top, even though I don't usually dress like that. I did so because I thought I was supposed to when traveling to different countries. But everyone else? Tourists wore thongs, crop tops, bikinis, and everything. Ironically, even though I was the one most covered up, I was the one who got harassed and catcalled everywhere. No one else seemed to be having a problem, and it slowly started to set in that it was probably because they were all adults and I was not. That day, we had gone out to the pool. We didn't stay long. I didn't even get in the water. I was covered up too. Dry clothes, nothing suggested. When we were done, we started heading back up to the hotel room. I thought my mom and her boyfriend would be with me all the way there, but they stopped at reception to ask a bunch of questions. I was uncomfortable and needed to use the bathroom, so I went into the elevator by myself. I reached the door to my room and tried to open it, but the handle was hard. I tried harder, 2 more times, but to no avail. My mom's boyfriend had been opening the door, so I didn't realize it was so sticky. Then, I stood in the hallway for a moment, unsure of what to do. That's when the man came out, emerging from a nearby room to join me in the otherwise empty hallway. I turned away from him immediately, not making eye contact, facing my door. He walked past me, despite the fact the elevator was in the other direction. I watched out of the corner of my eye as he looked at me, scanning me up and down, then said something in another language, hesitating at first. I turned and asked him to repeat what he said. He looked me straight in the face and said, in English, in this slow, deep whisper, "You're so beautiful, for real." It wasn't flirty. It wasn't kind. It was intense, like someone amazed by an object they want to take. I said thank you, because in that moment, I still thought maybe people here were just friendly. That's what everyone kept saying. The man then asked if I wanted help opening my door. I wanted to believe he was trying to help me, but something was telling me not to let him. I said no, I can get it myself, but then he just stood there, staring at me with a creepy smile on his face. I didn't want him to follow me into the room, so I walked away, not toward the elevator, as I didn't want him to follow me in there either. Instead, I went toward the window at the end of the corridor where he had come from. I stood there, looking down at my phone, pretending to be texting a serious conversation. Then I heard footsteps again as he walked past a second time. He went into his room and quickly came out with someone else, another man. Both walked right past me, and then they stopped just past my room, lingering, waiting. If I wanted to go into my room, I would have had to mess with my sticky door just feet away from them. If I went through the door into the stairwell to try and get away from them, I knew they would just rush over and follow me. Then they'd corner me in a concrete cage with no windows, where few people bothered to go. They weren't that far away. They could easily do it. I was frozen there for what felt like an eternity. Then, without either of them saying anything, one of them walked out of the corridor, then turned toward the elevator. I heard it chime a moment later, as I was wondering what he was up to. Were they giving up? Surely not, because the first guy was still camping by my door. Suddenly, it hit me. He was just going to go down a floor so he could come up through the stairwell. As soon as I realized this, the man by the door started walking, not to the elevator, but to me. I panicked, knowing if I didn't get out as fast as possible, I would get trapped between the two of them. I turned around and went down the stairwell, leaping down 2 steps at a time. I went down to the halfway landing, then hit the turn just as one of them came bursting in through the upper floor. Not even a millisecond after I passed the door on the lowest floor, it opened, and I saw 2 hands reaching out to grab me. They missed by a hair. Then a moment later, the 2 men ran into each other, giving me the space I needed to get away from them. I made it to the ground floor, where my parents were still at reception. I frantically told her what happened, then pointed at the stairwell door, and the 2 men came out at that moment. My mother was about to go yell at them, but her boyfriend held her back and said that wasn't a good idea. This made me pissed at him, as he was basically admitting that all that talk about how everyone was just being friendly was bullshit. Sure, most people were just nice, but that meant some could use that expectation as cover. I never left the hotel room after that. I stayed in the safety of being behind the dead-bolted door. Even then, I kept getting the feeling that someone was waiting for me just outside. But every time I went to look through the peephole, it was like they could hear me coming and walked away. This trip has all but ruined the idea of traveling for me, especially as a young girl. I'll never trust what anyone says about how safe a place is, and they can look me in the eye and lie.